Okay, thanks a lot, Tracy. Hi, everybody. My name is James Gibbons, and I'm going to be presenting the fixed asset module. At the end of this topic, you should be able to explain the process of managing the fixed asset items, recognize the key terms in the fixed asset solution, and identify the relevant submenu and windows in the SAP Business One. I'm sorry, I've got some tone that keeps coming in. I still haven't figured out where it's coming from. Sorry about that.
Well, we can't hear it, James.
Oh, well, that's good.
Isn't it?
It must be just for me.
Right.
I think, yeah. Okay, so fixed assets. Here we're looking at anything that's a long-term asset that we keep on our books in our balance sheet. An illustration is a truck. When we are going through the fixed asset module, we'll talk about the item type fixed asset. We'll be looking at the codes, the asset classes that relate to the assets. We'll discuss the depreciation area in which the depreciation occurs. We'll look at the account determination and the depreciation type. So the objective today is to go through the life cycle of the asset, and we'll look at the definition of the asset, activation, where it becomes capitalized. We'll discuss a depreciation run. We'll look at the other fixed asset transactions such as transfer, revaluation, and appreciation, and we'll have a brief discussion on the disposal. Okay, so in fixed assets, there is some setup that has to be completed prior to you using it to do the amortization calculation. The advantage of the fixed asset module is that you can set up your fixed assets, capitalize them through the accounts payable, and then automatically have the depreciations calculated on a monthly basis and posted to the GL. We go in through administration and setup, financials, and fixed assets. And here is where we are going to prepare the system to do the amortization calculations. So under our setup, we'll look at the account determination, what depreciation types there are, what depreciation areas we could use, the asset classes, and attribute groups. Okay, the first area that we're looking at is the account determination. So in the account determination setup, you're going to set up a asset class and then identify the general ledger accounts that are associated with that asset class. So for example, here I have a code for buildings and we have the balance sheet accounts. The drill down gives me the capability of drilling into those accounts to look at, so I can go into the account. It's going to take me to my depreciation account for that asset. As you go through, you can basically use the lookup, find the proper GL account, associate it with the asset, and then that will assist in doing the calculations. Under depreciation types, we have the normal amortization types that you will realize. So straight line is one of them. Declining balance is another depreciation type that you can set up. So these are the different depreciation types. Straight line with period control, declining balance, multi-level amortization, immediate write-off, special depreciation, and manual depreciations. You have the tabs that allow you to create the calculations. So for example, on this one on the building, I've used class 3, which actually is the CCA class for amortization. I tend to use the CCA classifications when I'm setting up the depreciation types because that will allow me to calculate the amortization and not create a significant balance in my deferred accounts. So it gets rid of the timing differences in your financial statements. So once you've established the level, you can put in the different aspects of your amortization. So for example, here you have the half-year convention that can be included in the calculation. So in Canadian GAAP, you amortize half a year in the year of acquisition and half a year in the year of disposal. So this setting here allows you to create those conventions. So there are other options to include, which potentially include depreciation of previous periods. So for example, you might have just started and you want to have some assets that have already aged. So you'd do the previous depreciation and include it in the calculation. The other area of setup is the depreciation areas. This one here, I wasn't 100% certain of when I began looking at it. I started out with setting up an amortization area, depreciation area based on the provinces, but in further investigation, they state that a depreciation area could be a gap area. So in Canada, we're going to have the small business gap for our accounting, and then on an international basis, we may have international financial reporting standards. So if you're a Canadian subsidiary of a European company, you may account using Canadian GAAP here. However, for your parent company, you prepare a set of IFRS statements, and by having these two asset areas, it'll allow you to do the comparison of the amortization for your particular area. An interesting aspect of IFRS is you can't write off 100% of an account of an item. As long as it's in use, it has value, then you have to revalue that asset to indicate that it's still functional and it's still on the books. Now, the depreciation asset classes, as I had mentioned, I like to use the asset classes that are provided by the CRA. So if I go down here, you can see that I will look at the different asset classes and set these ones up within SAP, and that way you will have the same depreciation calculation as you would have for tax purposes, thus no deferred tax. So asset classes set up, you can go in, and I set up a depreciation area in my previous tests, and I've set up a code for containers. I'm assuming that the company that I have is using refrigerated containers, therefore we have to set up the containers for shipping climate sensitive products. So that is the setup that you're required to get your fixed assets in place. Oh, I'm sorry, one other area that needs to be administered is in the system initialization and company settings. I'm thinking I'm right. There is a checkbox for your fixed assets. So you have to select this checkbox to enable fixed assets in order to make the fixed assets work for your company. Next, we're going to look at the amortization transactions. So if you go into your financials, fixed assets, you will find the various transactions that are available to you under your fixed assets. It starts out with the fixed asset master data. In here, you create your fixed asset. So I'm again, using as an illustration my temperature control shipping container. It has an item type of fixed asset. What that does, if you look across here, you know, similar to other item master files, you have a set of tabs related to that item. And on this item, the differentiating feature is because we've called this item a fixed asset, I've created a fixed asset group so that you can put your items in the same asset groups, thus able to apply the same amortization type. You can also do it by unit of measure group, which is relatively new, and which price list that item works for. What you'll note here is it's not selected as an inventory item, but it is selected as a sales and purchasing item. As with other items in the item master file, you have all of the information relative to purchasing and sales related to that fixed asset and any inventory. So under the fixed asset tab, this is where we get the differentiation between the item master that would go with an inventory item and an asset item. So the item has a status of active. We've assigned the asset class container, for which I've hooked in different depreciation schedules. I've created an asset group for it to belong to. Now you'll notice that these are basically on-the-fly fields that you can add new information, so I can create a new group and include my assets in there. So when you're looking at setting up your assets, you'll want to look at the, you know, what are the different asset groups that I can, or assets that I can put in a single group because they have the same type of attributes for amortization. I also have a depreciation group, so again I can create a new group on the fly. I call this one a logistics group, so everything related to logistics would go into that particular group, so I can use them for as cost centers. The location of your asset allows you to track where your assets are. That comes in handy for companies that have multi-branches. I've assigned a technician to the asset. A lot of these assets require service, so you may have a service technician and who the salesperson was. In the tab, you also have the financial information related to that particular asset. So I've already acquired some of these containers, and therefore there is a value that is in my asset master record. I've also tells me here that I did a depreciation run, and the depreciation method for this asset is straight line depreciation. Under the other tabs, we got the value tab. This is where the asset amortization transactions are recorded. So in here you get your asset value. It will, if you're in retirement, how much you retired it for, if you transfer it to another asset location, how much the asset was moved, whether there was a write-up or not. So for example, I was talking about IFRS that you can't write off an asset that's still in use. Here you would use the write-up to add value back into your asset and the ordinary depreciation, and you get a year-end balance. So you would have this table available for each one of your assets, and that will help you if you're producing audited financial statements to provide some valuable information for your auditors. Here is the table, the amortization table. Now, please ignore these numbers. This is a sample set, so some of the stuff might not make sense. But I've posted the depreciation. It tells me how much it's going to be amortized in that period and over the life of the asset. You have an opportunity to do cost accounting with this asset. So for example, if this asset was in an office in your Vancouver office, then you could have, as part of your project management and assignment and cost centers, your Vancouver office, and you can include that type of information on this form, and it will post to the expense accounts of that particular location. The other aspect of the table is that you can put in different attributes. So if there's certain attributes of the asset that you want to record and communicate with other people, it provides you with these fields, but it also has another set of 64 attributes, just like the other master records, where you can include far more information that's available for the asset. So the first step in your asset management strategy is to set up your items in the master file. The acquisition of the items occurs when you purchase it. So for example, if I go into my purchasing document, I'm going to do a quick purchase order from my folks at Far East Imports, and I'm going to select a container. So now I've ordered 750 of them. I can add this to my purchase record. I'm going to go back, copy from that, copy to a goods receipts PO, and I'm going to add that goods receipts PO, which provides me with the asset. And now when I go back into my assets, or goods receipts PO, then I should be able to copy that goods receipts PO to an accounts payable invoice, post the accounts payable invoice, and now oops, oh, it doesn't, everybody always wants the taxes. Okay, so. Okay, so we're adding the AP record. Now, when I go back to my fixed assets, we're going to go back into our financials, fixed assets, and if I go to the capitalization document, the purchase that we just made is now in the capital asset register. So by defining this item as an asset, then whenever you purchase it, it will automatically post it to your asset ledger. You have the ability to issue also a asset capitalization credit memo. So if, for example, you return some of the goods to the vendor, then you can issue a capitalization credit memo, and it will automatically adjust the amortization table to reflect that. Retirement is another transaction that is available for your fixed asset. Typically, if you have an asset, you'd sell that asset, so you would cut a invoice for that particular asset and sell it, and then the calculation of the net book value and any gain or loss on the assets will accrue to the retirement document. You have the ability to transfer your assets to another location, and then that will move the asset from one area to another. So if you had a Toronto office and a Vancouver office, you might transfer, a printer out to them, and then you would transfer that asset off your books and into theirs, and that way you could capture the costs of sending that out to that office in the transfer document. Like everybody else, I get lots of windows open. I like to close all. Gives you a chance to close all the windows. Okay, so now we're talking about you can either have a manual depreciation run or an automatic depreciation run. So in here you can select your posting periods that you want to post to. You can go in, choose your asset, and you can add that depreciation amount for a manual depreciation calculation. You may have to do that, for example, if an item is being scrapped because it no longer functions, then you might do a manual depreciation entry and then dispose of the asset. The depreciation run is set up so that you set the period. So we want to, let's depreciate the asset to the end of the month, and we can preview the calculation of the depreciation for the period. So here it's saying we've got the container and we're going to have ordinary depreciation of $5,200 that's going to be posted. When I go back into my container, it allows me to link back into the asset class setup. So if I want to maybe alter that group or change that, I can go back and change that. So now that I've set the asset up, I've gone through and I've created the depreciation run. The depreciation is going to be based on my past purchases, and then I can execute it. Oops, doesn't like my posting date. Still didn't like my posting date. It doesn't like the fact that I'm trying to do it in March because we haven't got to that date yet.
Hey guys, I just want to point out, I just shared in the chat box a link that I found that's the SAP portal, the help section, and you've got a link there and it covers everything on assets and management, so there's a lot of really interesting information in there if you want to copy it and dig down a little further into it.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so we got the depreciation run. Yeah, that portal's good, Tracy. It actually has more in it than the normal help function, so
Absolutely.
It's worthwhile to.
Yeah, it's at help.sap.com, and you can find anything you're looking for in there for your software. It's all there. It's pretty helpful.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now let's see if I can get this posting date to do what I wanted. See, I've already done a February run, so I don't think that it's going to let me do this depreciation. Well, no, my posting date's not working because I already posted a depreciation. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, in addition to running the amortization, you can do an asset revaluation run, and this comes in handy for anybody that has international financial reporting standards where you have to revalue your assets at the end of the period. And finally, you have your fixed asset reports. You can forecast your amortization schedule out, and it will give you what your amortization forecast will look like going into the future. You can look at the asset history, and it'll display the history for that particular asset. As you can see, I don't have a lot of assets in there. The status report and the asset transaction report. So in conclusion, we have discussed the administration and our setup of financials and fixed assets. And under the fixed assets, we looked at the account determination. We've talked about the depreciation types straight line versus declining balance as an illustration. We looked at depreciation error areas, so GAAP versus IFRS, asset classes. CCA comes in handy for your asset class, and your attribute groups. Now in here, I didn't get a chance to discuss this, but in here you have your typical 64 over 64 attributes that are available for you to assign to your asset. So as you can see, you've got a variety of field types that you can set in here for attributes: text, numeric, date, amount, price, and quantity are available for you to attach as an attribute to your fixed asset. So we've talked about the setup of the fixed assets, and in addition, we went through the financials down to the fixed asset option and discussed the transactions. We had a look at the item master data. We talked about the capitalization. I illustrated the AP, purchase of the item, and how it came and did the capitalization document automatically. You can issue a credit memo against that document and return those goods. In your retirement, you can issue an AP or an AR invoice for the item, and it will do a calculation of your gain or loss on disposal of assets. You can transfer the assets to another location. You can do a manual depreciation run, or you can do an automatic one. With asset-intensive company, that would be the way you'd want to go. Asset revaluation, you also have the opportunity to do a fiscal year change so that you go into your next period. So it'll give you what the fiscal years are, and then that'll allow you to change it. So are there any questions?
James, a quick question about does anywhere in this module is there a definition where which says where the asset is physically located?
Yeah, there was a cell in there that identified the location of the asset. So let me go back into fixed asset. So if you look at this container, there was a field that set a location of that. Now this is the master data. That's not going to apply to that fixed asset, that particular one, but you'd have a different record for each asset. And you have a spot here for the location right there. So that location could be a spot on the floor, Sharant, right? So if you had zones in your plant, then you could have, you know, that the assets in zone A, B, or C, or if it's in the other production facility, that the assets are there. I've always fantasized about putting the XYZ coordinates in there and then doing an asset map of where all the assets are. So,
thank you.
Yeah, a lot of. Any other questions? Okay, so Tracy.
Thanks, Sharant. If you just want to put up did somebody have a question? I thought I heard someone. So you've got the support desk here, but like I said, if you look in the little chat box, I put in a link there for, and you should use this really, help.sap.com. Yeah, you can ask any type of question for anything for your software. It's really useful. And you've got your support here that's free, that's included in your maintenance plan, and I can help you with anything as well if you've got any questions. If somebody wants a recording of this, please send me an email. I normally send it out to everybody who assisted anyway, but sometimes I don't have all of your emails. So maybe just send me an email, tracy@forgestik.com. And our next session is going to be in 2 weeks. So on March 31st, we're going to be covering purchasing and planification management, MRP. So I'll be sending those out in 2 weeks. And if we can help you out, just give us a shout, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks.
Oh, and one other thing, folks. This is the brand new SAP Business One User's Guide, which is available from us for $95 or from SAP Press, and it has a detailed explanation and instructions on SAP Business One 9.2, all the modules. So it is a great resource and well worth considering. Till next time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, James.
Bye.
Bye.
Yep, bye.